There are nights that divide a life into two parts, before it happened and after it happened. For Peter, that night came quietly. No thunder, no warning sirens, no dramatic sign in the sky, just a courtyard, a small fire, a few strangers, and one question. Weren't you with him? That was all it took. A man who once stepped out of a boat and walked on water. A man who once declared, "You are the Christ." A man who swore loyalty stronger than death would, within hours, deny even knowing Jesus. Not because he stopped loving him, but because fear whispered louder than devotion. And when the rooster crowed and their eyes met, Peter realized something terrifying. He was not as strong as he believed. And for a moment, it must have felt like everything was gone. His confidence, his calling, his identity, his future. But that collapse did not begin in the courtyard. It began much earlier. Hours before the fire, they were gathered together for the Passover meal. The air felt heavy with meaning. Something irreversible was unfolding. Jesus spoke words that unsettled everyone. "All of you will fall away because of me tonight." The room grew quiet. Peter broke the silence. "Even if everyone else falls away, I never will." It was not arrogance in tone, it was sincerity. He meant every word. Peter loved Jesus fiercely. He had left behind a stable life as a fisherman. He had walked away from predictable income, from family routine, from familiarity. He had seen miracles that could not be explained away. He had watched storms bow. He had watched demons tremble. He had seen the dead breathe again. His loyalty felt unshakable. Jesus looked at him and said something deeply personal. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." Peter rejected the idea instantly. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." The other disciples agreed. Confidence filled the room, but confidence can be deceptive. There is a form of faith that sounds bold, but is rooted more in self-trust than dependence. Peter believed in Jesus, but he also believed strongly in his own strength. That subtle mixture would be tested within hours. They walked to the Garden of Gethsemane. Olive trees surrounded them. The night was unusually still. The weight of what was coming pressed heavily upon Jesus. He was visibly distressed, the kind of distress that reveals deep internal struggle. He asked Peter and the others to stay awake and pray. "Watch with me." Then he stepped away and fell to the ground in prayer. When he returned, Peter was asleep. The same Peter who had promised unwavering loyalty could not remain awake in a moment of spiritual urgency. Jesus woke him gently. "Could you not watch with me 1 hour?" He went back to pray. He returned again. Peter was asleep again. This happened 3 times. 3 moments of spiritual weakness before 3 public denials. The failure in the courtyard was not sudden. It was preceded by exhaustion, by lack of vigilance, by a subtle spiritual drift. Spiritual strength is not built in moments of crisis. It is revealed there. Then came the sound of approaching footsteps. Torches pierced the darkness. Soldiers surrounded the garden. Peter reacted quickly. Sleep vanished. Adrenaline surged. He drew a sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. He was bold again, but this was impulsive courage. It was action driven by emotion, not spiritual stability. Jesus stopped him immediately. "Put your sword away." And then they arrested him. The disciples scattered. Peter ran too, but he did not disappear entirely. He followed from a distance. That distance matters. Close enough to observe, far enough to protect himself. Following, but disconnected. That is often how spiritual decline looks. Not abandonment, just distance. Distance weakens conviction gradually. Jesus was taken into the high priest's courtyard for questioning. Peter entered and sat among the crowd near a fire. He tried to blend in, tried to appear ordinary, tried not to draw attention. A servant girl looked at him carefully. "You were with Jesus." It was not a threat, just recognition. Peter responded quickly, "I don't know what you're talking about." The first denial slipped out with surprising ease. Moments passed. Another person said, "You also are one of them." Peter's response intensified. "I am not." Fear was growing now. Inside the courtyard, accusations were flying against Jesus. False witnesses were speaking. The tension was thick. Then someone else noticed him. "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Now his identity betrayed him. He could not hide it. Cornered, Peter began to curse and swear, "I do not know the man." The third denial. Immediately, a rooster crowed. The sound cut through the night. And then Jesus turned and looked at Peter. No words were spoken, but in that look was memory, warning, sorrow, and still love. Peter remembered everything Jesus had said, and he went out and wept bitterly. Not quiet tears, bitter weeping, the kind that empties a person from the inside out. He had not only failed publicly, he had failed personally. He denied the one he loved. In that moment, shame must have felt unbearable. What did Peter think he had lost? He had once been called a rock. Now he felt fragile. He had once proclaimed divine revelation. Now he denied association. He had once walked on water. Now he could not stand firm before a servant girl. The contrast must have tormented him. Failure often hurts most when it contradicts who we thought we were. Peter's identity was shaken. Yet something deeper was happening beneath the surface. The confidence that once made him declare superiority over others was gone. The pride that said, "Even if everyone else fails," was shattered. What remained was humility, painful humility, but necessary humility. After the crucifixion and resurrection, there was another fire, another setting with flames in memory. Jesus stood by the sea and invited the disciples to eat. After breakfast, he turned to Peter. "Do you love me?" The question bypassed performance and reached the heart. Peter answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my sheep." Again, Jesus asked, "Do you love me?" Again, Peter answered. Again came the instruction. A third time the question was asked. 3 denials. 3 restorations. This was not accidental symmetry. The wound was being healed deliberately. Peter was no longer the loud, overconfident disciple. He was humbled, and humility transformed him. The man who denied Jesus in fear would later stand boldly before thousands and proclaim the gospel without hesitation. The man who once blended into a crowd would later face imprisonment without denial. The night he almost lost everything became the night self-reliance died. And when self-reliance dies, dependence grows. Peter's story reveals something profound about human nature. We often overestimate our strength before we are tested. We assume loyalty will be automatic under pressure. We believe devotion guarantees courage. But courage without dependence can crumble. Peter did not stop loving Jesus. He feared consequences more than he trusted himself in that moment. Fear clouded clarity, and fear can do that to anyone. Yet restoration proves that failure is not final when humility replaces pride. Peter was not discarded, he was reshaped. Brokenness made him steadier. Experience made him compassionate. Humility made him bold in a deeper way. There are people listening who understand that courtyard feeling. The feeling of compromise, the feeling of silence when you should have spoken, the feeling of blending in when conviction felt costly, the memory that replays, the shame that whispers. But Peter's story stands as evidence that collapse does not cancel calling. The rooster's crow was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a different kind of strength. Not loud strength, not boastful strength, but tested strength. Strength that had failed and returned. Strength that no longer trusted itself blindly. Strength anchored in grace. The night Peter almost lost everything was not ultimately about denial. It was about transformation. The breaking of pride, the exposure of weakness, the invitation to deeper dependence. And that invitation still echoes. Failure can end a story, or it can deepen it. Peter chose to return, and because he returned, his worst night became the foundation for his greatest impact. The fire in the courtyard revealed his weakness. The fire by the sea restored his calling. And between those two fires, a man was transformed. Not perfect, but refined. Not fearless, but faithful. If this message is resonating deeply, subscribe to Scripture Simplified by Markson now. Because these stories are not distant history, they are mirrors, and there are more nights, more failures, more restorations to uncover. The next story explores another disciple, another betrayal, a different kind of kiss, and what it reveals about the human heart. The rooster crowed, Peter broke, but grace rebuilt him. And that is why the night he almost lost everything became the night he found who he truly was.